It's awesome to have you here today. We have an hour together, and the goal of this discussion is to understand how to find revenue opportunities in your existing user base. We're in 2023, everyone is trying to do more with less. And today it's super exciting because we have experts with us that have walked the talk. Something I'm a bit annoyed by in PLG is that there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of content that is on the surface, but now we know that PLG is a strategy that works super well in product-led sales, can be a game changer for your business, but it's rare that we get the opportunity to have experts who have done it before. The experts that you have talking today have built revenue teams, sales teams from 0 to hundreds of people, and have been responsible for hundreds of millions of revenue by the initiatives that they've run at those companies. So I'm gonna let those experts introduce themselves briefly. Let's start with Carrie.
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm Carrie Running. I am the go-to-market lead for our PLG segment at Coda, and I oversee a few functions. First is sort of our coaches team, that's sort of our human-led motions who run a lot of bottoms-up engagement to drive activation and adoption in some of our high-value accounts. Then I also lead our sort of self-serve learning and support teams, and so they build content for our customers, delivering it across various channels, really with the goal of unblocking them and enabling them to experience value on their own. And then prior to Coda, I was at Zendesk for about 6 years. I started in sales, and then I went into sales management, leading SMB self-serve teams. And then I went on and led business strategy and operations for our global partner organization.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Carrie. Mario.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm Mario. I've been in product growth since I don't know how many years, maybe 10 or something, mostly B2B. I've worked with companies like OutSystems, where I joined when we were like 40 people up to 3,000 people, and from 5 million to 10 B valuation. And we've gone through various iterations of what we're going to talk about today. Joined Softr, completely different company last year, where there's not even a sales team, so 100% self-service. So at a contrast there. And I advise, right now I'm a full-time advisor, interim leader, so I support multiple other companies transitioning or implementing their product-led sales motions.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Excited to hear from you. James, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm James Orgrove. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I've been working in startups for the last 10 years or so. I joined Stripe in 2014, kind of before we had a sales team. It was a very product-led company then, and spent 6.5 years there working on building out the go-to-market, first in the UK and Ireland, and then in the US. There, we very much had to transition from just being product-led into adding in sales resource and building out eventually an enterprise sales team. So yeah, excited to kind of maybe talk about some of that today and how to manage that transition. And then similarly, once I left Stripe, I joined Series A, now Series B startup called Fidel API. There, actually, we went the other way around. We started out very sales heavy, and then we were trying to figure out how to build in more of a product-led motion into our go-to-market strategy. So scaled that company from Series A to B from about 35 to nearly 200 people. And again, some of those common go-to-market challenges of B2B companies. And now I advise startups that tend to be between seed and Series B on everything go-to-market related. So everything from how to transition away from founder-led sales all the way through to how do I think about building a scaled sales team, what incentives, compensation, etc. do I need? So yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. This is going to be a super cool discussion. I realized that I completely forgot to introduce myself. My name is Fred Valenson. I'm the head of content at Calixa. For those of you who don't know what Calixa is, we're a product-led sales platform. We help PLG companies like ClickUp, Netlify, and Jasper find revenue opportunities in their existing user base and then run the playbooks that are needed to convert those opportunities into revenue. Quick agenda for today, guys. We are going to have a panel discussion. So basically, that's why I was asking everyone in the chat, and please continue to do so. If you're a PLG company, an SLG company, or a hybrid, what we'll try to get out of today is how. We have 3 experts that have done it, that have built teams, that have strategized PLS strategies. So we're going to keep away from the on the surface stuff and ask how they've done it. 45 minutes of panel discussion, and then the last 15, keep your questions. At the end, I'll ask in the chat if you have questions for the experts, and we'll go through your questions for Mario, Carrie, and James. Before we jump into it, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see the experts talking. Calixa and Product Led have partnered on a benchmarking survey for PLS. The goal is not to figure out whether or not PLS is relevant or PLG is hyped up. We all know that. It's a great strategy. We're trying to answer how. So if you're tackling bottom-up sales right now at your company, please take the survey. I'm going to add the link in the chat in a few minutes. Takes 3 to 5 minutes to fill out. So that would be awesome if you can take a few minutes to help us figure out how companies are tackling bottom-up sales. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and let's jump right into it. Let's start with how, Carrie, you've ran sales initiatives at Zendesk, which was traditionally more top-down, and now you're running bottom-up sales. I'm curious to understand how you identify opportunities in your existing user base where everyone is trying to do more with less this year. So how would you think about where opportunities lie in the customer funnel?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the first thing that's really important to get clarity on is like what outcome you're trying to drive, and then like where you're trying to drive that from before you just start running plays. So I think, determining the outcome, the most important thing is to understand what those milestones are for your customers that they need to hit in order to convert and to expand. I've always partnered really closely with like our data and insights teams, and done a lot of like modeling to determine, hey, what are those milestones that contribute to activation, to conversion, and to expansion? And then in terms of where to drive the outcome from, especially for the teams I've led, which are more of these sort of like human assist motions, determining which accounts for them to focus on. And we've always anchored on like high potential customers. So those that we want to be able to grow into enterprise sized customers down the line. So looking at a combination of usage, firmographics, like white space within these accounts, and then just how they're growing. Once you have sort of the outcome you're trying to drive and then the accounts you want to focus on, I've always put sort of our human teams in front of these accounts with the goal of driving those accounts towards those milestones. It's definitely less of a like direct, expansion sell, trying to upgrade, trying to get them to add more like agents or users, whatever that might be. And more of like, we want to get them to these milestones because we have proven that these milestones help drive revenue. I think one thing that is really important to keep in mind is we don't want to put humans in front of every single customer as like a human band-aid to like get them over to these milestones. But to really have them learn what these customers are experiencing, what's preventing them from hitting these specific milestones, and then take those learnings back to product and marketing. So you can go scale that and you can go automate that and actually create these experiences within product. So I think, we've then oriented a lot of plays around driving these specific milestones. I think some specific examples like at Zendesk, we want to get an agent to create their first macro or publish their first help center article. At Coda, we want to get a maker to build their first doc, invite a teammate and go share that first doc that they've built. And so, running a lot of plays to drive them to do those certain behaviors. And we like to do a lot of experimenting. So I love to start with just like plays that the team's running. They're trying different messaging against different users. We're seeing what's working. We're seeing what's not. We're iterating. And then whatever's working, we can go scale a little bit further. So yeah, I guess summary, like know the milestones that drive revenue, identify those high potential accounts, and then run experimental plays to drive customers towards those milestones, and always learn and take those learnings back so you can go scale it.
A lot to unpack here. So we'll try to go a bit deeper so people understand how what popped the hood on that answer. In terms of figuring out which milestones and looking at the data and trying to come from, okay, where in the customer journey should I run a PLS play, for example? Mario, any thoughts on a framework for or process for understanding which data points are telling me that a sales should get involved, or where do I have my opportunities from a data standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good one as well. I think depending on the stage you're at with PLS, it will vary. It will become more data complex. One quick hack to get teams started that I always share is just start with the hand raisers. Someone that raises their hand because they need support using your product, support those. Then what I normally hear next is, oh my God, we have to scale our customer success team because we're going to get so many requests. I think you want to have that problem. Once you have that problem, start segmenting the ones that you give, I'm going to say, white glove type of support, white glove type of customer success, because not all prospects are equally valuable, but definitely make sure that everyone has a journey to success. Sometimes a user with a Gmail account that Clearbit cannot identify as a high priority account, or the user doesn't talk much with you, so you don't know much about them, like which company they work for or whatnot, maybe actually a user evaluating your product, and maybe the CEO or the CTO or whatever buyer persona you have. So support, make sure that everyone has a path to successfully get value of the product. So I'll start there. Once you get past the hand raisers, the next step could be to start to establish correlations between behaviors and monetization, behaviors and sales at the team level and at the individual user level. And that's when it becomes fun, right? You will know that users that did this 5 times, or teams that have done this 5 times over the course of this period, have higher correlation to paid. And you can then do a bunch of other cool stuff like optimize your onboarding, proactively engage, and engage in context of the behavior that they've shown, and not so much as, hey, I'm your customer success person, can I help you? And then send them another email and another email.
That's super interesting to find those patterns. How do you find those correlations? How do you find those patterns? Because I hear it often is where we want to add sales to the mix and we want to automate where customers are most likely based on their product usage to convert, but we don't know where those, we don't have a way to figure out those correlations. Any low-hanging fruit there for teams trying to figure this out?
I'll tell you, I'll share my perspective on this. Low-hanging fruit could be just talk to users. I know this is a basic answer, but I call this eating broccoli, depending again on the stage of your company. And I'll give you an example. I did this once. If you don't like broccoli, this makes sense. So eating a broccoli means, and a specific story from OutSystems, we were prioritizing something related with this at the time, and we had a team of 100 or 200 people just going through. So what do we do next? What do we do in the next 3 quarters? How do we accelerate time to value and whatnot? And I had a migraine, and I had to go home because my migraines just used to send me to bed for 24 hours. Had a migraine, wake up 8 hours later, and I'm like, I have nothing to do. I was stressed because my team was stressed. And so I started reading reviews. We had like 600 reviews in Gartner Peer Insights at the time. And so I read them all. It took me 12 hours to read them all. I clustered all the problems. I clustered all the opportunities. And then I came back on Monday, this was a Friday, to the team and said, hey, look at this. It was a map, like tied to goals, to pick up on what Carrie was saying before. And then we knew what to do. Suddenly we knew what to do. do something based on a sample of 10, we had 600, is much better than do something based on a sample of 0. So you start there. You can bring tools like Calixa and other things to the mix later, but do talk to customers. Eat the broccoli constantly, because that's where I get inspiration, and then pair with data scientists and whatnot. But you come from a place where you have done the homework, you have examples and facts from the field, from the customers, that you can then use to create a foundation for hypothesis generation. Yeah, so
that's very good advice.
Anyway, I hope this helps people. I'm happy to talk further, but it's something that I'm really passionate about, is actually talking to customers.
No, it is. That's very underrated advice. That's super valuable. Before you get ML models into the mix and data science teams, like, talk to customers, understand the intuition of where customers might have roadblocks in their journey that sales can have an impact on. Speaking about sales reps, James, sales reps are expensive. Building revenue teams is expensive. You have done it from 0 to 200 when you were at Stripe. How do you go about deciding whether or not a human should, let's say, so Mario talked about how you can look at places in your customer funnel where there's high potential. How do you go about deciding whether or not a human should be involved or fully automated?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think this kind of follows on nicely from the last one, which is, I would say you first look at the overall journey that the customer is going through and the kind of conversion rate of each step. That will give you some clues as to where there might be some problems, which could be resolved through adding people, or could be resolved through further automation or changes. So, for example, you might identify, oh, that's weird, a lot of customers drop off when they get to paying for the product or to the pricing page. Maybe that's a good experiment, like Carrie said, to run, which is, okay, well, instead of them having to pay there and then, maybe we have them speak to somebody or be able to request like a customized quote. And that's a good opportunity to experiment with a person in order to see whether that can increase your conversion rate. So yeah, I would start by looking at looking at the data, looking at where the conversion rates are falling off, and then experimenting with adding people there. I always like to start with experimenting with people and then automating second. So a person can do an experiment, see if it makes a difference. And if it does, you can think about, is there a smart way to automate this so that we don't have to have a person doing it? If there isn't, then that could be a good signal that you can then, you're then going to need to build out more of a team to take on that function. So I'd say first, look at the data, second, experiment with people, and then third, figure out what you can automate. Now, what you can automate is going to depend on your product, your customers, who the individual persona of the buyer is. And not everything can be automated, especially, let's say you're selling to more enterprise customers. You're going to need more people to do that. If it's a more SMB product, you can probably more likely automate it, and it will make more sense, economically to automate it. So what can be automated in the long run? I would say you should try to automate everything, but be realistic about when it makes sense for your product, your customer, and kind of tread slowly and build it out that way.
And as a leader, James, going a bit deeper there, as a leader, how did you evaluate success on having a human in the process? Like your go, no go, whether to automate, keep the human, does it make sense to have a rep? What was your process in evaluating it? Yeah,
so I think, like Carrie said, first you have to define what the output you want to get out of that is, and understand why you're looking to get that output, right? So maybe your objective, your output is to close as many of those customers as possible, right? That will lead to a different decision than if you're trying to have as low a cost of acquisition as possible, right? And so first of all, I think you have to look at, okay, what are we trying to achieve here? What is the output we're looking for from this step? Once you understand that, then it can become clearer what is viable and what is not in terms of what can be automated or what can support having people work on it. So if you're trying to get as low customer acquisition costs as possible throughout the different stages of the funnel, you're going to want to minimize the amount of human interaction during that sales process, because obviously anything that's not automated that's done by a human is going to have a higher cost and therefore increase your cost of acquisition. So understanding why you're trying to do what you're trying to achieve, and then building back from that of how it can be achieved, will automatically rule out some options. Now, that doesn't mean you can't experiment with adding people to a process earlier on to see if there is something that can be improved there. But you should definitely be thinking about whether it can be scaled in an automated or a human way. So yeah, that's how I'd think about what can be automated versus have humans added. And then if the choice is to add humans, you need to understand what that role entails. So once you've run the experiment and you know what good looks like, then you can start thinking about, okay, this role is going to entail these activities. What is the right type of person, the right team structure, the right incentive and metrics for that person? So there's kind of the different stages you go through when you're building these type of teams.
Well, you're beating me to it. That's exactly where I was going is, okay, now you've identified that there's some place in the customer journey where you want a human to interact because they could add value, close more revenue than on the self-serve path. Carrie, again, you've seen both sides. You've been part of teams that were more traditional sales, and now Coda is very heavily bottom up. Do you need different people to run? Like, how do you look for people to join product-led sales team? Do you need a different sales rep from a traditional motion? How do you think about who you build your team with?
Yeah, I'd say like where we've seen success with more like the PLS motion is we very much take like a success-led selling approach. And so I mentioned like the coaches team, it is very much kind of like a hybrid role of like AE, CSM traits, BDR traits. And we use the team a lot for feedback, for kind of like research purposes, for identifying what we can go automate, what we can go scale. And as James mentioned, like we like to run both proactive and reactive plays. And we sort of have this funnel where we use the team to go run experimental plays they use their sales engagement tool. They can craft messaging, they can, target the user base, change the CTAs. Like it's very flexible. Go run those plays. Let's measure them. Let's see what's working. Whatever's working, let's go scale it through our growth marketing team, through our growth marketing engagement platform. That's then hitting a lot more users, extending reach. And then once we've scaled it, like let's go build certain experiences and product. Let's go utilize our content team to go build that content and on-demand programs and these like more scaled programs. So we're less reliant on humans. So yeah, I do find that the profile is definitely a little bit different and unique compared to maybe like at Zendesk, we had a little bit more of like traditional kind of AE tops down sales motion, and at Coda, definitely much more like this bottoms up. Let's make sure the end users are experiencing value, they're successful, we're unblocking them, and we're learning along the way. So definitely some different traits I look for within the team there.
Interesting. And does the training change? I've heard from David Barron in HubSpot that he thinks the best product-led sales reps are half AE, half sales engineers. Does that change how you're training maybe your reps with product usage, or how does that affect the onboarding process for reps?
Yeah, definitely different. I'd say I'm huge with onboarding programs. So like when I was first building out the coaches team, it looked very different to the onboarding programs I had for like SDRs in the past and AEs in the past. And I pretty much put together like a 6-week module for everyone and run them through like really how to obviously have these different kinds of success-led conversations with customers, how to utilize product data, how to utilize a lot of the tooling that we have internally and like analyzing a lot of this product usage data as well. And then how to like really communicate internally so they can be very cross-functional with our teams, providing that feedback, ensuring that we're getting those messages from, you know, what they're hearing from customers and really able to go scale that and automate that. Yeah, onboarding definitely looks a little bit different. Again, it's hybrid of a role. So I think, you know, you can look for someone who's had a little bit of maybe SDR, a little bit of selling experience, some success experience, someone who's a little bit more data oriented, and someone who's just very, I think, like loves to solve problems and like loves to take on challenges and like learn new things. I think you need someone who's going to be like constantly trying to identify those opportunities to learn and explore more with customers.
Gotcha. And you said one thing that's super interesting is the importance of having kind of cross-functional collaboration between teams. Data needs to be involved, product needs to be involved to some extent, marketing for product marketing or enablement material. Mario, any insights or advice in terms of making that collaboration work? Because I know that's something a lot of enterprise companies are struggling with, is breaking barriers in between teams to make that product-led sales motion work. Any advice there, or how you've done it at OutSystems?
Yeah, it's interesting that you're asking this question, just because I had many conversations this week about this particular topic. The one thing that I will touch on from a higher level to start with is incentives. What incentives have you put out to have you set for your sales teams, for your marketing teams, for your product teams? Most often than not, when you're starting this and experimenting with this, they're not aligned, which means that like to cite some Derek from Cooper, you'll get sales to do funny things just because a lot of people don't have the empathy for the sales teams that they don't know that sales teams get fired if they don't deliver. Sales teams don't get half maybe of their paycheck if they don't sell. And so they will not break your motion just because they will break it because their incentives are wrong. And most often than not, this can break the strategy. From a cross-functional perspective, I would highlight three things. So marketing teams will have to move on from like the traditional sort of lead scoring, like gating content, getting points and whatnot, and then finding someone to call, get an SDR to call those folks. They'll have to include behavior signals. And at some point in time during the transition, it happens that you have both scoring models on, and it's just a total screw up because you have marketing wanting to deliver MQ, marketing qualified leads, and you have the product growth or whatever product led sales team trying to deliver product qualified accounts and product qualified leads, and they get some sort of into conflict, and then it's really just a mess. So I think that you fix that by aligning the goals. It's probably a stage in between when you move on to product-led sales, or it's probably looking at the type of persona. You fix that by understanding who's who. So in one previous company I worked for, if it was an executive, we would try to engage. Executives, we proved that, would appreciate the call. They would appreciate a salesperson to engage because it would make their evaluation much easier. They would see that as this person is answering my questions faster than what I can research them, and so it's value. Whereas we would have the same salesperson calling developer, the developers would be like, "Don't call me. I don't know you. I don't want to take any calls. I don't even talk on the phone because I'm a developer." No, just kidding. I'm a developer, so I'm making jokes about myself. But we don't like to take sales calls. So this would be an example. So as far as marketing is concerned, there's also the fact that marketing people will have to know the product inside out. They will have to develop these skills. They cannot no longer stay at the higher level of what the product is. If they want to look at behavioral data, they need to understand the product, what that data means. And so cross-functional here is really important because we don't have teams of unicorns. So they will need to collaborate on that. Also, as far as lifecycle marketing, lifecycle will evolve from nurturing leads to consume more content. It has to evolve to activating those users inside the product, to activate those teams inside the product. So there are changes there. So as far as customer success teams are concerned, they will have to potentially, I'm going to shortcut all of this, potentially even close deals and then let the account managers expand those deals. So yes, we could probably, I have seen companies where the teams took the deals from the new logo deals from the sales team and shifted sales to expansion of logos in partnership with customer success. And then sales go like, oh my God, the new deals. But they don't realize that the new deals in this motion sometimes are much smaller than the expansion deals. And that's a big thing.
And I want to anchor there. Sorry to interrupt you, Mario, because I want to anchor there because that's very relevant. You're tying to compensation, mentioning sales reps being involved in the motion and incentivizing them to focus on product-led deals. But then you alluded to success also taking deals, and the nature of deals is changing. You might not close 100K right away. You might close 10K, and that will grow to 100K. So I want to dive deeper there. James, how did you structure or adjust, if you did? I'm not assuming you did, but compensation at Stripe to motivate sales reps? Because something I hear a lot from, and I've asked at the beginning, a lot of you guys said you were in hybrid situations where your company has both a sales-led and a PLG motion. What I hear often is sales reps will resist selling product-led deals because at first they appear smaller. So I'm curious on if you've made changes to the comp structure and what would you do in that scenario?
Yeah, so I think compensation is very important, especially when you're in this hybrid type of approach, because when companies are transitioning from one model to the other or trying to layer them on top of each other, you can resist changing some parts, and it has to be thought of as a whole system, right? If you resist changing sales compensation when you're trying to add more product-led growth, then you're not going to get as much out of that product-led growth as possible. And in the worst case scenario, you might end up with a sales team that's doing completely the wrong thing versus what you're trying to do as your overall go-to-market strategy. So I think it has to be thought of as an integral part of the overall system that you're building. So I would say there's two things that I think are most important here. One is where you actually want your sales team to be focused. So, in a more fully sales-led model, you would have different roles which address different stages of the sales process. In a kind of hybrid type of system, you might have sales only involved in the later stages of a customer's sign up and activation, and less so in the beginning. And so you need to think about where you want that sales resource to be applied, and then therefore what metrics are most appropriate for their compensation as a result. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, as you mentioned, in a lot of these more product-led type of products, you end up with not the traditional deal structure of like a fixed contract value or an upfront minimum, and then maybe some excess usage. The majority of your revenue is going to come from excess usage, if not all of it. And so that also leads to a kind of different dynamic with compensation. So whereas in a more sales-led model, you might pay based on that initial contract value, and you can do that at the end of every quarter. In a more kind of product and usage-led product in particular, you are going to want to be looking at the actual revenue that you're generating. That's going to be over a longer amount of time, and so that very materially affects the comp plan structure that you're going to build. How we address this at Stripe was to and there are lots of different ways to do this. This is not saying this is the best way to do it, but we looked at the actual revenue that was generated by a customer that was signed by sales over a 12-month period following their activation. And then we paid out a bonus based on the total amount of revenue that was generated by all of the deals that a salesperson closed on a quarterly basis. You'd have this kind of rolling 12-month window where any revenue that was generated from any deals you'd done in the previous 12 months contributed to you hitting your target. And then that was part of a fairly standard OTE system. That worked pretty well in that it aligned the incentives well, and it was aligned with what activities and what outcomes we wanted from the salespeople. I think the downside of that sort of approach versus a more traditional kind of quarterly contract value based is that there's a lot more ambiguity and uncertainty about how much revenue a customer is going to generate, right? If they really take off and they grow a lot, then you can way exceed your target, but you may not have full control of that. So there are some downsides of that system, but it worked pretty well in aligning the type of deals we wanted salespeople to be doing with the dynamics and the kind of revenue generating potential of those deals. So that's how we thought about it at Stripe.
Interesting. What about you, Carrie? How are you thinking about comp at the moment, Coda?
Yeah, so for our kind of like human assist coaches team, we actually look at a few different factors. So a lot of it is based off of, so the way we run it is we run it like tops down and bottoms up motion in conjunction with our traditional account executive teams. And so we have our coaches team running sort of the bottoms up motion, ensuring that our end users are getting value out of Coda, they're activating, adopting, expanding to new use cases, we're getting new teams to join. The AEs are more responsible for that like exec engagement. So we're running them together in the same accounts. I think that's really important. We have exec engagement going on, and while we are nurturing and ensuring these end users are successful in those same accounts. So a lot of the team is, we look at like what specific usage metrics that they're driving within these accounts. A lot of it's based off like the user profiles and the behavior, and then new use cases, new teams joining the workspace. And then we also goal on feedback. I know I've talked about that a lot, but we do goal on ensuring that they're providing valuable feedback to our product and growth marketing teams so that we can go scale and go automate. So that's also a component that we really look at.
Interesting. And we have a few minutes left before we jump into questions. So guys, keep your questions for our experts. But before we jump into it, there's one last thing that you all touched on, which is you understand what are your goals, you define where the customer journey should sales reps get involved, and how do you compensate to do that. There's one missing piece from my perspective, which is how do you make it easy for reps to take action? Because the nature of a sales engagement from a top-down motion versus a bottom-up motion is completely different. So Carrie, back to you again. How do you make it easy for your reps to understand what's going on and have the right conversation with someone that's already in your product?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one thing that's been really helpful is consolidating all of your product usage data in one place as best you can. We have a lot of it in our CRM, but we actually use like our Coda. We use our own product for it. So we use a Coda doc where we pull in using our Snowflake and Salesforce packs, all the account information and usage information. We can tie it together in like one filterable table for reps. So they can see new use cases, like if there's been an increase in active users, paid seat and future utilization, if accounts are hitting usage limits. And then we could create like automations and conditional formatting. So again, it's one place for them to look. What's also great is everyone in the organization can also see this doc. So our growth marketing teams, our product teams, our data teams can all like access the same resource as well. And then we have playbooks for those specific plays I was talking about, where we're trying to drive customers to a certain milestone. So we have a team playbook that's also in Coda, but we have like a table for each play that they're running. And again, we experiment with different plays. So we'll recycle plays and try new ones and throw them in there. But each play has what the end user is experiencing that's driving that messaging. And again, that messaging is either coming from the coach themselves doing more proactive outreach, or from a more scaled outreach through our growth marketing platform, what stage that customer is in, the goals, like what are we trying to drive from this particular account in this particular stage and the particular milestone we're trying to get them through, what that talk track looks like, and then what the follow-up looks like. So I think just having clear like playbooks for the specific plays and being very clear on what outcome you're trying to drive and actually how to engage with that customer is super, super important.
Interesting. Completely agree with that. James, is that something you also had, some kind of playbook system, context, what's going on, then what you suggest in terms of actions, and then how you approach the conversation? Curious.
Yeah, definitely. So I totally agree. I think having all of that data about product usage and about interactions outside of the product. So we would look at whether people had viewed the docs, whether they'd come to a webinar, and all sorts of things like that. Having that in one place is really valuable for the sales reps. And also being able to see, and this is where you can use a CRM system, see all of the different contacts that are related to that particular company to see whether you're getting more kind of traction within an organization. So yeah, we definitely did a lot of that. And then based on where we felt they were in the sales cycle, based on their product usage and their interactions outside the product, we would then have playbooks for different stages. So maybe they signed up for the product, they'd done some test API calls, but they hadn't actually activated their account, they hadn't looked at certain parts of the documentation, they hadn't looked at the pricing. We then had a playbook of like, okay, well, before they're ready to move on to the next stage, they need to know how the product works beyond just what they've seen of it, and they need to know what the pricing is. So we'd have a playbook of, okay, for this type of persona, these are the next steps that we need to take. And depending on the size of the company, the type of persona, that could be automated. That could just be an email being shot out being like, oh, by the way, this is what you need to do to activate your account. Or it could be, like Mario said, somebody calling up that person saying, oh, I saw you were playing around with the API. Did you need help with anything? Or did you want to talk about the pricing? So yeah, you want to figure out what stage they're on based on that data, and then have a playbook which allows you to kind of move them on to the next stage.
Yeah, it's super relevant. I think it also goes back to sales resisting transitioning. That could be a major part in reducing and increasing that buy-in. Is the motion is very different. So if you're providing context and a step-by-step guide so that reps know exactly what to do, that catalyzes the whole process way more than like, hey, now sell to accounts, and the motion is completely different. Awesome. Well, we'll jump into questions. We have 13 minutes remaining. Andreas, I see you have a hand raised.
Yes,
thank you.
Yes, thank you. Love the session. I have a question for Carrie. About what you said a minute ago, with I think you said feedback, goal on feedback, I think is what you framed it. I had the same idea, but how do you set it up in a way that it's not super subjective of somebody saying, oh, this is feedback that counts towards that goal, versus like it can't be just somebody sent a message to product because of something we've learned, right? So it has to be some measure to it, but this is what I feel without having implemented it, only having that idea, that drawback of where do you draw the line where it's like actual above that threshold of a learning that should be compensated.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's two ways we've approached this. The first piece is just as a team, in like our team meetings, every week we would review, just within the coaches team, we would review the feedback provided, and we would chat through it and discuss and see, like, did other coaches have the same experiences with customers? Like, are we hearing this across the board? It was helpful to get a feel for like what feedback was sort of helpful and what resonated even just within the team. But more broadly, having that feedback filter into our team meetings we'd have with product and growth marketing, and having them review feedback and essentially what they determined as, valuable feedback that could be actioned either now or in the future. Like, are we going to be able to prioritize this in Q1, or are we going to push it to Q2? That was really designated as like that valuable feedback. So I think it needs to be action oriented. If it feels like it's feedback that can be, that's where we would really push the team to provide.
So it was kind of a two things I hear from that. Thanks for that answer. It was kind of transparency out in the open. I would assume that it had to be transparent to all the sales reps, so nobody feels like completely in the dark. Okay, so this was valuable, this was not. And also it was kind of a committee decision then, in a sense, to say, yes, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, definitely. So the idea is we wanted to be able to utilize that feedback to, again, go like scale, go automate, create experiences. And so, and we work very, very closely just within our segment with our product and growth marketing team. So just already having that close collaboration and trust, I think, was really important. And, you know, the team is excited to be able to provide feedback and contribute to what they're going to go build in the product. That's a really exciting thing for them. So they strive for that.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Andreas. Jay, you have a question? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I did. I'm wondering if the panel has used tagging at all. Just like say as like a function of heuristics, where, you know, we've heard a lot about data being ingested in the system, like actions people have taken, perhaps within the app and also outside of it. And if you have a tagging system, you can basically create tags for people when those events occur, and then even perhaps roll those tags up into, say, like a sales stage or alert a rep.
Yeah, I can start on this one. Yeah, we used a lot of tags at Stripe when we were scoring the inbound leads and the signups. I think nowadays you can get so much data from product usage and also enrichment of, you know, the details that you get during the sign up process, that you want to be rolling those up into tags to make it easily digestible for the sales team. So instead of, you know, as an example, showing how many times that person's logged in or viewed a document or sent an API call, you just want to roll that up into a tag that says, okay, they've done, you know, they've logged in at least once, or whatever threshold is material for your product. So I think you definitely want to roll those up into tags. And then, as you mentioned, you can then use those to drive the stage that they're at in the sales process. So you might set a criteria saying, okay, this deal cannot move into being a qualified opportunity until that person has, you know, hit these 3 criteria, some of which could be product related, right? They might have had to sign up for an account and logged into their account before, and some of them could be sales related. So they also have to have had, you know, a qualifying call with sales. So I think, yes, tags are very important because of the sheer amount of data you get nowadays. You need to roll them up. And then the smart thing to do with those tags is not just create visibility around them, but also use them to drive the stage of the deal and therefore inform what the next steps that need to be taken, whether that's automated within the product or within the sales team.
Yeah, so disposition them for action, whether it's entering them into a playbook, which should be automated, or again, plotted into a sales funnel if it's sales led.
Exactly. Or you can have some combination, right? You can say, okay, we're going to automate this to this type of person that's involved in this deal or for this type of activity, but this type of activity or this type of person needs, you know, some sort of human contact. So you can also have a hybrid. It doesn't have to be an either or approach.
And would you say that's a few levels beyond lead scoring? Because, you know, I heard previously that in this conversation that lead scoring isn't, I mean, it's kind of an artifact almost at this point. What's your take on that as far as like how far like an extended tagging system it would go beyond like sort of like conventional lead scoring?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an artifact in the sense that you want to be using these data points and these criteria throughout the customer's sale and life cycle overall. So you don't just want to have this sort of data and tagging available on leads. It should be available throughout the sales process and the customer's life cycle. And again, I think scoring is probably a bit too rigid a way of looking at it. I prefer to look at it as like kind of gates that have to be met to be able to move through to the next stage. And the inverse is true, right, as well. There's certain actions that a user can take which are negative signal, which you might want to build actions off the back of more from a customer success or account management point of view. So I think you can use that throughout the whole life cycle of that customer rather than just concentrating that in the lead stage.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks, James. Thanks, Jay. Unsolicited shout out here. One of the most powerful and appreciated feature that Calixa just rolled out to Netlify and ClickUp is machine learning scoring. So we look at your past customer data and we try to predict customers that will convert based on your conversion actions, what has your best customers done in the past, so that humans don't have to iterate on that score. With product data, it gets exponentially tougher to figure out a score that is productive and leads to results. And like James, you mentioned, there's also the need for understanding where in the journey it is, not just like over 75 have reps engaged. So that's a cool feature that we have launched recently. Another question coming from Martin: should the system in which reps work with the leads have all this up-to-date product data, or is it more the job of an external system? It feels like these information is always too far from the reps. So I think this question is, where should the product data live? And I think that's relevant. Also, Mario, curious to have thoughts there. Should product data be in the CRM and stay in the CRM? Should it be another system? How do you make it easy for reps?
I'll be very short in this answer. I think it should live in the system where the sales team is working on. We want to remove as much friction from the sales team as possible and provide information. It's not just dumping the metrics of product usage, is providing these metrics in a way that sales can actually have a conversation on and act on. It's not just the data, it's the data and the context. It could be just data and training. It could be whatever, but sales need to be able to understand what those data points are and how can they drive a more meaningful and valuable conversation with the prospect, in my opinion.
I agree completely. Last question before we leave you guys alone for today. Coming from Alan, besides user behaviors, other filters that you've applied to drive the right accounts. Carrie, you've talked earlier about persona fit, classic hand raisers, product data. How do you weigh in those three axes and prioritize one versus the other?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it will vary based on your own product. I will say we tried it a few different ways. We tried it where we surface like one particular signal to a rep each time, and that felt we didn't feel like that was the most effective way. It was pretty noisy, and we felt like we were driving just like one initial behavior to a rep, and we weren't really looking at the account holistically and other behaviors that individual would exhibit. So we moved to like a little bit more of like a scoring model where we look at a combination of behaviors within an account. And with Coda, it's a very collaborative product as well. So we want to see that like more than one user are doing things within the workspace. So some things like we definitely look at just even like I talked about having the team work on sort of high potential accounts that we want to move into enterprise. We definitely take into account like the size of the company. We take into account, are they exploring new use cases? Are we seeing them building new docs that are different to the docs they had before? Is there an increase in like our monthly active users? Are we seeing just like more users join the workspace from, docs being shared? And then, we even look at within the account, if they're a paid account, like, are they utilizing all of their paid seats? Or are they not? Are they utilizing all the features of their paid plan? I think that's a really important one where we see a lot of people upgrade organically and then they're not utilizing the features that are now available to them. And that's definitely something that can be a churn risk in the future. So making sure that they're really getting the most of it and we're being the most sticky. And then something that, is important to us is like looking at integrations and packs. Those are like really sticky in accounts. Obviously that's very product dependent, but I think looking at a combination of these things, and again, kind of using that to score and flag these sort of product qualified accounts. And then we label those product qualified accounts and kind of push them out in all our systems to get all of our proactive and reactive plays running on the back end.
Awesome. Well, we're out of time, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to the experts. It was a really interesting conversation. I'm glad we got deep on some subjects. I hope you guys got a lot from it. Thanks to everyone who listened. This webinar is recorded, so we'll share as soon as it's ready with everyone. Follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll share it around when it's ready. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
See ya.
Thank you.
Cheers.